There's a strange moment that happens when you tell someone you don't watch football. Their face stiffens for a second, almost like you've confessed something controversial. In a world where billions treat the sport as a weekly ritual, where families gather, cities pause, and entire nations hold their breath over a single goal, your indifference becomes an anomaly. People assume it's a lack of passion, or that you're simply not into sports. But the truth is far more intricate. Human behavior is rarely that shallow. Beneath every preference, every habit, every rejection of the collective norm, there is a psychological blueprint quietly shaping the way you see the world. Because choosing not to watch football isn't the same as ignoring a TV show or skipping a movie. No, this is a culturally sacred activity, a global language, and when you opt out of it, it says something about who you are, how your mind processes meaning, and what your inner world demands in order to feel engaged. It hints at deeper cognitive patterns, how you regulate emotion, where you place your sense of identity, what kind of stimulation your brain is wired to crave, and even how you define personal growth. Most people never question why they cheer. They simply join the noise, absorbed by the collective excitement. But you stand at a distance, watching a celebration that never fully reaches your heart. This distance isn't random. It isn't a flaw. It's a signal, a quiet psychological marker that, when understood, reveals far more about you than the sport ever could. So today, we're not here to judge the game. We're here to decode the minds of those who walk past it without a second thought, because the moment you diverge from the herd, your psychology becomes twice as interesting. When someone doesn't watch football, the world often assumes it's a simple preference, like not liking a certain food or not enjoying a particular genre of music. But in psychology, the absence of interest can be just as revealing as the presence of it. What seems like a harmless disconnection from a popular sport often points to a deeper, quieter tension happening beneath the surface, a mismatch between what society celebrates and what your mind genuinely finds meaningful. This isn't about the game at all. It's about the architecture of attention itself, and how your brain decides what is worth investing emotional energy into. Most people underestimate how powerful social momentum is. When millions around you treat something as sacred, you're expected to feel at least a spark. You're expected to join the collective excitement. And when you don't, you might feel a subtle pressure, a sense that you're missing something everyone else seems to naturally understand. This invisible friction is what psychologists sometimes describe as cultural dissonance, that odd silent gap between the world's expectations and your brain's wiring. You're not resisting the sport. You're resisting the emotional script that society hands out for free. This dissonance often leads to small but significant internal questions. Why doesn't this entertain me? Why don't I feel what they're feeling? Why do I feel disconnected from something everyone else treats as universal? These questions don't always rise to the surface consciously, but they shape your perception of yourself. They plant the idea that you're somehow outside the circle, even when you're perfectly content where you stand. And here's the hidden truth. People who don't watch football often have minds that prioritize depth over spectacle, autonomy over conformity, and meaning over noise. Their lack of interest isn't apathy, it's alignment. Their brain simply refuses to invest in something that doesn't stimulate it on a level that feels purposeful, and that subtle divergence, that quiet refusal to follow the current, is the first real indicator that your psychology functions differently from the majority. What looks like disinterest from the outside is often the early sign of a mind wired for introspection, independence, and selective attention. If this is already opening your mind, consider liking this video. It helps the channel reach more people who need this kind of clarity. Imagine a man named Adrian. He works in a crowded office where, every Monday morning, conversations explode with the same ritual. Match highlights, dramatic goals, controversial referee calls. The entire floor becomes a reenactment of the weekend's games. But Adrian sits quietly at his desk, sipping his coffee, nodding politely when someone tries to pull him into the discussion. He doesn't dislike anyone there. He simply feels like he's watching a play performed in a language he was never taught. For years, he thought something was wrong with him. As a child, he tried to fit in. He memorized player names, watched the matches with his cousins, even pretended to feel excited. But the emotion never arrived. The cheers around him echoed like background noise. Eventually, he realized he was imitating passion, not feeling it. So he stopped forcing it. And the moment he did, something unexpected happened. His mind opened a door to entirely different worlds. While his friends were glued to the screen, Adrian found himself captivated by documentaries, design projects, strategy games, and books about human behavior. He didn't abandon football out of rebellion. He simply felt more alive elsewhere. Psychologists would say his dopaminergic pattern favored intellectual stimulation over collective excitement. Every time he learned something new or solved a problem, he felt a surge of meaning that no match could replicate. And once he discovered this, he never looked back. But here's where the story gets interesting. One day, at a company retreat, a speaker mentioned a well-known study by Professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the researcher who coined the concept of flow. The study revealed that people feel the most alive when their mind is fully engaged in something personally relevant, not socially expected. Listening to this, Adrian felt something click inside him. It wasn't that he didn't like football. It was that it never pulled him into the mental state he craved. As he understood this, his self-perception shifted. He wasn't an outsider. He wasn't missing anything. His brain simply followed a different reward system, one based on curiosity and autonomy rather than collective excitement. And the moment he embraced that, he stopped apologizing for who he was. And if you're fascinated by the hidden architecture of human behavior, subscribe to Inner Truth Lab so you don't miss the next insights. Here's the moment where everything becomes clear. People who don't watch football aren't defined by disinterest. They're defined by a fundamentally different psychological orientation. Once you strip away the social expectations, the cultural rituals, the collective excitement, you begin to notice a deeper pattern running through these individuals. A unique configuration of attention, identity, and emotional processing. One of the most significant traits is selective engagement. Their brain doesn't distribute attention according to what society labels as important. Instead, it funnels energy toward experiences that feel internally rewarding. This is not stubbornness, it's cognitive efficiency. To them, immersion requires meaning. Without meaning, excitement feels hollow. This is why many of these individuals excel in solitary pursuits, intellectual hobbies, or personal creative projects. Their mind is wired to pursue depth rather than join noise. Another key mechanism is identity autonomy, the capacity to form a sense of self without anchoring it in group belonging. Football culture thrives on unity, shared rituals, and synchrony of emotion. But people with strong identity autonomy don't rely on collective enthusiasm to feel connected to themselves. They don't need a team to mirror their values. Their emotional landscape is self-generated, not crowd-fueled. This often makes them appear distant, when in reality, they simply rely on internal reference points rather than external cues. Then there is emotional filtration, the unconscious process of evaluating whether an experience deserves emotional investment. Watching a match requires you to care about outcomes that don't affect your life in any concrete way. For some minds, this exchange feels imbalanced. They instinctively reserve their emotional bandwidth for things that shape their future, their craft, their well-being, or their relationships. Anything outside that circle becomes noise, no matter how loud the world celebrates it. Finally, there's the concept of purpose-driven stimulation. While others find release in spectacle, these individuals experience fulfillment through progress, understanding, mastery, or creation. Their dopamine system is calibrated to reward internal milestones rather than external victories. That's why a match that electrifies millions may leave them untouched. Their mind is searching for a different kind of spark. Understanding this shifts the entire narrative. It's not that these individuals don't get the hype. It's that their psychology operates on a frequency tuned to personal meaning rather than collective emotion. So what do you actually do with this insight? Understanding why you don't resonate with football is interesting, but the real power comes from recognizing how this psychology affects the rest of your life. Because the way you engage, or don't engage, with collective excitement reflects how you approach work, relationships, creativity, and personal growth. Once you see the pattern, you can use it to your advantage, instead of wondering why you feel out of sync with the crowd. First, embrace your selective attention instead of treating it like a flaw. If your mind naturally invests energy only in what feels meaningful, then structure your environment around that. Remove empty noise. Reduce activities that drain you. Prioritize the pursuits that ignite genuine focus. You're not wired for passive consumption. You're wired for intentional engagement. Second, use identity autonomy as a strength. People like you often make better long-term decisions because they're not chasing social approval or group belonging. You see the world through your own lens, not through the lens of a crowd. This helps you resist trends, emotional contagion, and impulsive choices. Lean into that independence. It's one of the rarest psychological advantages a person can have. Third, refine your emotional filtration. Instead of feeling guilty for not caring about what others care about, identify what does deserve your emotional investment. Where do you experience genuine excitement? What activities create immersion? What topics spark curiosity? When you consciously map your emotional landscape, you stop forcing yourself into experiences that feel artificial. Fourth, intentionally design your reward system. Since your brain thrives on growth, mastery, and personal relevance, create routines and challenges that give you small, frequent victories. This might mean learning a new skill, improving something in your career, building a project, or diving deep into a subject that fascinates you. When your dopamine is aligned with purpose, your momentum becomes unstoppable. Fifth, understand that your disinterest in mass entertainment doesn't isolate you. It's actually a gateway. People with your psychological profile tend to gravitate toward richer, more meaningful communities. Seek them out. Surround yourself with minds that value what you value: clarity, depth, introspection, and autonomy. And let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed this pattern in yourself? This quiet refusal to invest in things that don't nourish you? Tell me in the comments. Your perspective might help someone who feels the same, but never knew how to put it into words. Now that you understand the psychological patterns behind not watching football, there's an important caution to keep in mind. This mindset, this ability to detach from collective excitement and think independently, can be a powerful asset. But like all strengths, it comes with risks if left unexamined. People wired this way often walk a thin line between independence and isolation, clarity and cynicism, selective focus and emotional numbness. And recognizing those dangers is essential if you want to use your psychology constructively rather than letting it quietly sabotage you. One of the first risks is emotional overdetachment. When you naturally filter out experiences that don't feel meaningful, it becomes easy to unconsciously filter out people as well. You might dismiss social gatherings, shared rituals, or bonding moments because they appear unproductive. But humans don't connect only through depth. They also connect through simple presence and shared moments, even when those moments seem trivial. If you withdraw too much, you may unintentionally weaken relationships that could have added richness to your emotional life. Another danger is intellectual elitism, a subtle mindset shift where you begin to feel internally superior for not engaging in what the majority enjoys. It doesn't start intentionally. It's more like a quiet narrative that grows over time. I'm different because I don't follow the crowd. If you're not careful, this can distort your perception of others and create a psychological barrier that separates you from meaningful human connection. Independence should never turn into quiet arrogance. You want to see the world clearly, not from a pedestal. Then there's the risk of hyper-individualism, where you convince yourself that you don't need community at all. People with your psychological patterns often pride themselves on self-sufficiency, but total self-reliance is a myth. Even the strongest thinkers need environments where ideas are exchanged, where perspectives challenge them, where support flows in both directions. If you isolate too deeply, your growth slows, your worldview narrows, and your emotional resilience weakens. You should also be mindful of emotional understimulation. When you reject collective excitement in favor of deep selective interests, you must ensure your chosen pursuits actually nourish you. Some people fall into a pattern of consuming information endlessly, books, videos, theories, without building real experiences that anchor their inner growth. Your mind requires more than knowledge. It requires engagement, presence, and emotional diversity. Finally, there is the subtle trap of confusing avoidance with clarity. Not participating in something doesn't always mean it lacks meaning. Sometimes it reflects a wound, a habit of withdrawal, or fear of disappointment. Self-understanding requires honesty. Are you choosing meaning, or are you avoiding vulnerability? Only you can answer that question, and it's a question worth asking. The goal is not to fix your psychology. The goal is to use it wisely, without letting its blind spots limit your potential. You have a mind built for depth. Just make sure it doesn't close you off from the very experiences that help a human being feel whole. If you've made it this far, then something in this journey resonated with you. Not because of the sport itself, but because of what your relationship to it silently reveals. Not watching football was never the point. It was never a judgment about a pastime, a critique of a culture, or a dismissal of what others find meaningful. It has always been a mirror, a quiet psychological window into the way your mind allocates its energy, chooses its attachments, and decides what is worthy of emotional investment. You've seen, step by step, that your divergence from the crowd is not randomness, it is not apathy, it is not a lack of passion. It is a pattern, one that hints at how your internal world prioritizes depth, autonomy, and authentic stimulation. And now, with all these layers uncovered, you may find yourself realizing something profound. The things you don't engage with can define you just as much as the things you love. Your disinterest is not empty space. It is a directional signal pointing you toward what actually matters to you. There is something powerful about standing slightly outside the collective rhythm of society. From that distance, you can see things others miss. You're not swept away by emotional tides. You're not absorbed by trends. You're not dependent on external excitement to feel alive. That quiet separation gives you a vantage point, a clearer view of your own desires, your own priorities, your own inner structure. But it also means your life will take a different shape than the lives built by mass enthusiasm. Not better, not worse, simply truer to who you are. If anything, this entire exploration offers a reminder. You do not owe your attention to the crowd. Your time, your focus, your emotional bandwidth. These are resources more valuable than anything you could measure. When you choose not to invest them in places that don't nourish you, you're not rejecting the world. You're honoring yourself. You're choosing intention over habit, awareness over imitation, meaning over momentum. And maybe that's why people like you often end up building unconventional paths. You're not easily swayed by hype. You look for substance. You think in long arcs, not quick distractions. When something doesn't align with your values, you simply walk past it. Not out of rebellion, but out of resonance. And that ability, when carried into your work, your relationships, and your personal development, becomes a quiet superpower. So the next time someone asks, "How can you not watch football?" you won't just shrug. You'll know the truth. You'll understand that your answer has nothing to do with the game and everything to do with the inner architecture of your mind. A mind built for reflection, depth, and self-directed meaning. There's a certain kind of freedom in that. A freedom that doesn't need applause or validation, only awareness. And when you learn to trust that awareness, your life no longer follows the paths designed by the majority. It follows the path designed by you.